Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. A total of 13 of 19 Nigerians detained in various camps in Poland have now been released. The Nigerians were released with the intervention of the Nigerian ambassador to Poland, Major General Christian Ugu. According to General Ugu, among the 6 left in the detention camps, one of them claimed that he is a Cameroonian because his mother is from Cameroon. He clarified that unfortunately the other 5 applied for international protection, that is asylum, in Poland, including Igwe Ikechukwu Christian, who had been interviewed by some foreign media. They cannot be released until the government of Poland takes a decision on their applications or they decide to withdraw the applications, and that's according to General Ugu. He assured Nigerians that the mission will continue to do its best to ensure that the interests of Nigerians are well taken care of, despite the fact that they had been adequately briefed on the likely consequences of remaining as undocumented immigrants in Poland. Let's talk now to international affairs analyst, Mr. Sonny Ekwuwusi, who is in our studios here in Lagos. Good morning and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
The story is still that, you know, there are still Nigerians stuck everywhere,
Of course,
you know, as a result of this conflict.
Yes.
But as we see it, there are those that I spoke to in the course of this week who said that they thought that by now this matter would have been resolved one way or the other.
The war must have ended now. No, it's not resolved because it's pretty over. We thought, Russia thought that it was going to be a kind of 5-day affair, but it has now dragged up to 54 days, a month and almost 2 months. So it's not an easy war because war, like I keep on saying, takes on many costs. You can never predict war. You know, it does. I always like to say that in a war, there's no winner, there's no loser, because everybody is affected. Everybody suffers. Right now, although Russia seems to have the upper hand because apart from the offensive in the east, they are now striking in the west. I think this morning they said that Russia has struck about 1,000 targets. No?
Yes.
They are going to. And then this has spawned so many humanitarian crises. We're now being told about so many refugees here heading to Poland. And
yeah, the doctor who was on just before you were saying, was telling us they are under a lot of strain.
One thing is that humanitarianism is an attitude for the individual, and it's also a framework for policymakers and for government. And so we have to always look at, you know, the humanity, because we are members of the same humanity. We all come out for so. The humanitarian crisis in this war is something that is paining so many people. Of course, the refugee crisis inclusive. Now, so many people have been rendered homeless. We are told that about 4-something million Ukrainians have fled the country and all that. And we're going to have more. And that's why people are saying that Russia shouldn't have, you know, violated the territorial integrity of Ukraine from the beginning. You know, whatever is the reason, they shouldn't have done that, okay? There are so many reasons for doing that and all that, but, you know, the cost of the war is tremendous, you know, that at the end of the day, both Russia, Ukraine, all of us, including Nigeria, we're all paying the price, you know? Price of foodstuffs have increased in Nigeria. We are paying the price for the price of wheat because Russia is a major exporter of wheat and all that. And Nigeria directly depends on Russia for the, what they call it, I think the durum wheat. And
right.
So before we know it, if this war continues to escalate, a time will come where we no longer have ordinary bread to eat. When it comes to that, it's going to be terrible. So I'm calling for the cessation of the war. The war should end by all means. The European Union should not be putting fire and trying to supply ammunition. This is not what Ukraine needs at the moment. What Ukraine and Russia need is the end of the war for everybody. Pride notwithstanding on Zelensky, and I don't know who is pushing him. I don't know, because they keep on saying that, you know, that Russia is bombing Ukraine, especially the eastern part. At the same time, it's not calling for the end of the war. So one is surprised. You know, it's a bit paradox because.
But then that also brings up the issue that, I mean, if the war is going to end, and I can only assume, as like you, that everybody wants to see it end. Although there are people who want to see it end on particular terms, which is why it has not ended.
Yes.
That which then brings up the question of who can bring it to an end?
I think that's interest. Our humanity should supersede interest, you know. I mean, attention should be paid to our common humanity. And that's why I'm saying that European Union, NATO, and also United Nations should do all within their power to ensure that the war ends. This is not the time we should consider primary interest, the interest of the US, the interest of Russia and all that. This is the time we should contrast the interests of humanity, interests of all of us. Selfishness should not have a part to play here, because everybody, like I said, is affected in one way or the other by this war. So this is the time to call for cessation of fire, so that all of us will ultimately benefit, because if the war continuing, nobody is going to benefit at all from it.
Given that scenario, just before I came to you, there was a story about the Nigerians that I was referencing, and one could think of Ukraine and Russia as being far away. But the Nigerians who both were professionals there and who were studying there as students have also been caught up in all of this, and their families back here. In the chair you're sitting now, yesterday I had a young student, only 20. He went there when he was 16 to study medicine, and he was just one of many. So when you talk about the humanitarian part of it, the humane part of the world, one could understand. But that brings up the question, why is that usually not the first place we go? Why is it that it is when people like you point to it that some people will say, yes, okay, that's also true. Why is this issue of arms and aggression and war is the first option?
It is terrible, because, that's why United Nations was set up in 1945 to say that in Article 2, Subsection 4 of the Charter of the United Nations said that nations should not violate the territorial integrity of the other nations or political independence of other nations. And despite that, it is still going on. The United States have done their own, they have invented so many nations and all that. Now Russia has done its own. Tomorrow, maybe China invading Taiwan or so. It is something that we should consider, because like I said, that humanitarianism should, it's an attitude for the individual. It's also a framework for policy makers.
I want you to expand on that part of the policy. How is that
policy
one?
In the sense that in trying to consider that if so and so war is fought, it's going to affect so and so. Taking that into consideration, like I said, that we are all members of the same humanity, and taking that into consideration before you engage in a war, you have to think about the repercussions and the effect it will have. Russia thought that this war was going to end in 5 days. Now it's 54 days, and
there's no sign.
Imagine that there's no sign. Some are afraid that it might lead to a third world war. We pray it does not. But the issue, what I'm trying to say, is that we should always avoid, from the beginning, to ensure that we do not have war. Right now, we are still suffering the negative impact of the First and Second World War, and now we have the Russia-Ukraine war. And let me tell you that it will take a long time for the war to recover from this war. The war might end soon, but at the same time, by the time you start taking care of the humanitarian crisis and the refugee, all sorts, it will take a long time. You're talking about Nigerian students, many of them are back to this country. They're not going to be settled in university. I don't know what's going to happen to them. They have paid money. Even some 50-year medical students are back to this country. What are they going to do? Their future is quite uncertain. Other parts of the world is also affected. We haven't come to the economy, how it's affecting Nigeria economy. That's another question altogether. Because Nigeria depends price of oil, it depends on refined products from Russia and all that. And right now, that has ceased. And don't forget that why it's hitting Nigeria badly economically is that our oil production has reduced over the years from $2.5 million in 2005. Right now, we're producing, I think it's $1.3 million that radically reduced. So we're depending on
barrels?
Russia. Yeah, barrels, exactly.
Okay, barrels.
Yeah, barrels. We are depending on Russia for refined products. Right now, that has stopped. So nobody knows where we are going. The price of F as skyrocketed
because the aviation fuel
has come. And we were talking about the issue of importation of other things. I mean, don't forget that apart from oil and gas, we also depend on Russia for agricultural products, you know?
You already mentioned
wheat. The wheat and all that. So this is something that is going to be a large scale. So it is the interest of the nations that this war comes to an end. Nigeria is far from Russia, but we are going to feel it sooner or later. Okay, things are still okay because, I mean, the shipments that took place before the war, one is still enjoying it. But if this war continues up to 4 or 5 months, we are going to be in trouble. Nigeria, because we are so dependent on Russia. And this is time for us to sit back and think about our national development plan. If we are so dependent on countries like Russia, we import everything. And then we're in this crisis, well, what is going to happen? So we have to look inward now and say, look, let us do something for ourselves. Our local production, agriculture, and diversification to diversify the economy. Because if we are depending on oil and all that, we are not getting it, we're going to be in trouble. So it is quite, Nigeria is a threat. And it's not only Ukraine that is threatened, but Nigeria is very much threatened by this war.
Before I let you go, I must talk about the UN, which you referenced earlier. Yes. Why does it appear to be that the UN is apparently so helpless?
Toothless bulldog. I mean, that is something that it was set up in 1945 for one primary reason, for protection, for peace and security of nations. The United Nations over the years has become something else. It can hardly protect anybody. Even there are clauses in the UN Charter to mediate in terms of war, for mediation and arbitration, conciliation. But the UN is not even doing anything about it. What it means that anybody, any nation might has become the rule. Any nation can wake up any day and invade a small nation and get away with it. And that's what has been happening. It's very unfortunate that the United Nations has become a toothless bulldog. It has failed to live up to its bidding. It cannot do anything. It cannot even intervene. People are saying, why can't the United Nations intervene now and mediate and so that the war will be brought to an end? But it's not doing that. He said there's so much politics. You have nations that are even more powerful than the United Nations. The United States. The United States is like the United Nations itself. They put their weight and they get away with it. And the so-called sanction is not working. You put sanction and some countries go behind and start getting the product of Russia at the same time. So there is compromise everywhere. And so we are living in a war that might have become right. And this is terrible because any nation can wake up any day and invade you, and there's nothing you can do and get away with it. This was what happened during the traditional days, before the fall, after the fall of man. Kingdoms were waking up and attacking other kingdoms. We thought that when we are modernized and civilized, we have United Nations, things will improve. United Nations and modernity and technology, we are still living in the past. That any nation can wake up any day and invade and take up our nation and get away with it, and nothing happens.
Yes,
it's quite unfortunate. It's quite unfortunate.
Mr. Sani Ekru will say thank you so much for your perspective on the program this morning.
I'm very happy.
Thank you for coming in.
Yes, thanks.